Tonight on Veritas, we venture into one of the most confounding and unsettling mysteries of our time: alien abductions. Picture this. You're in your home, a place where you feel secure, and suddenly, you're confronted by beings from another world, subjected to experiences that defy every notion of reality you've ever known. For many, these stories belong to the realm of fiction. But for our guest tonight, Philip Kinsella, this is a lived reality that has shaped his life's work. Philip is an author and experiencer who has spent years investigating the phenomena that have haunted him since his youth. His latest book, Terrestrial Trespassers, The Greys, Abductions, and Areas of High Strangeness, provides a chilling and thought-provoking account of these encounters. He questions everything we think we know about reality, consciousness, and the forces at play in our world. In his work, Philip doesn't just recount his terrifying encounters with the Greys, those mysterious beings that have been reported by countless others, but also pushes us to confront the deeper implications of these experiences. He challenges the boundaries of conventional thinking, urging us to consider possibilities that we might otherwise dismiss. Tonight, we'll hear his story, explore the truths he's uncovered, and ponder the questions that still remain. Philip Kinsella is coming up next. Welcome to the VERITAS Project. I'm your host, Mel Hostelrick. If this is your first time listening, welcome home. To access tonight's full interview and all of our exclusive material, simply join the Veritas Plus family by clicking on the subscribe button at veritasproject.com. And while you're there, don't forget to check out the Veritas store for a range of great products, including focused life force energy. Experience the power of FLFE with a 15-day free trial today. No credit card required. If you're looking to get in touch with me, have a guest suggestion, or would like to provide feedback, simply click on the contact button on our website. Your thoughts and ideas are always appreciated. So sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight's program. His latest book is titled Terrestrial Trespassers, The Greys, Abductions, and Areas of High Strangeness. His website is thekinsellatwins.com, and directly from Bedfordshire in the UK, I'd like to welcome Philip Kinsella. Hello, Philip, and welcome back. How are you?
I'm very well, Mel. Thank you for having me back on board. It's an honor. Very much. Thank you.
My pleasure. And it's been 3 years since the last time we spoke. You have a new book. Now, I'm not going to get into how it all started. Anybody wants to listen to that interview, we really went really deep into what happened to you, but it's always a pleasure. I've been diving into the book, and there's so much to unpack, Philip. Let's start with a big picture. What do you think the Greys truly are? Are they as enigmatic to you now as when you first encountered them, or has your understanding deepened?
My understanding has deepened, and as we all know, like yourself, Mel, and many other good researchers and authors, anyone that's remotely interested in this subject, that you do go through a period of transmutation. When I was a young lad back in the 80s, my idea of the UFO phenomena was literally nuts and bolts. And that's what the media promoted, and many researchers only had that to go on. And now it's really shocking to see that most of those attitudes have changed somewhat, not only in our progression with regards to science and quantum theory, but also I think in the way that we're seeing this phenomena. And so yes, with regards to the Greys, I mean, going back very briefly to the 1989 event where the abduction occurred in the village of Marston Mortain, just 5 miles outside of Bedfordshire, there were some Greys that were there. One of them that was quite noticeable to me at the end of the abduction. And I remembered after the abduction thinking over and over again, you know, what these beings were, how they were able to take me from my house and then take me through solid matter and into their realm, and also leave physical marks. And I remembered for some years, it was in 1996, that I kept thinking about this over and over again because I had no form of regression whatsoever. I incredibly could recall the whole account, as I still can today, as clear as though it happened yesterday. And you hear this, Mel, with many people who have these episodes of high strangeness where these situations are very clear within the human mind. And in 1996, I remembered that I was at work, and all of a sudden it seemed like my mind had opened up. And I do understand now about people having what they call downloads. I mean, if this is what it was quite spectacular, but it only happened for perhaps around about 5 or 6 seconds. And it was like a revelation had been opened, and it was about the Greys and about their possible true origins, about them, clones, the soul. It brought into the equation of the soul. And I remembered that when I got home, when I made the notes at work, cheekily in a stockroom with paper and pen, I went home and I furiously typed out this article and submitted it to a magazine called Alien Encounters, which was quite large back in the day. And they published it, and they considered it revolutionary within its speculative content. And that had everything to do with these beings that we call the Greys, that are masquerading or known as spacemen, which most researchers assumed. But I'm not so sure about that. I think that these beings are perhaps operating from a different level of reality and are able to infiltrate our plane of reality quite easily, and through means that still to this day confound us. So the Greys, I think there are a number of possible scenarios.
By the way, Phil, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Can you put your microphone a little bit closer to your mouth?
Yes, of course.
Much better. Thank you.
Yes, sorry. So there are many researchers who have their own theories about them, and we have to be open to all forms of speculation because no one really knows. Even the abduction that I had was just as confusing today as it had been back then. Nothing was explained to me whatsoever. But we have the spaceman hypothesis, we have the demons, we have AI technology. We also have them perhaps possibly, as I've thought, being remote viewers that's coming into our reality from theirs, projecting themselves into our world. No different from a remote viewer that can actually, in some instances with the military and trained personnel, remote influence as well. Or we could be dealing with something that's from another dimension, that is not able to reproduce. And one of the main questions that fascinated me was why a species that cannot reproduce are interested allegedly in a species that can. And I say allegedly because when I had my abduction, I didn't see any hybrids or any talk of, creating these new beings through human and alien DNA. I didn't see any of that. But we have to take that into account. So I believe that these Greys are interested in us as a human species, as individuals, because we can create, reproduce. We are individual, and the Greys appear as though they are not individual. They seem to operate as we believe, as a one-mind hive consciousness. And there must be some truth to those claims because many people who have experienced the Greys and researchers who have done their homework have discovered that these beings obviously operate within one mind hive consciousness. And that also is interesting because, with regards to this subject matter, you can go into all sorts of areas. But I believe, jumping forward a little bit here, just to make a note, that our system fears us as individuals because it wants to know what we're thinking. It wants to know what's going on. And of course, you have the system spying on people, watching them. And I believe that eventually within our future, it's possible, if the system got away with it, that transhumanism will take effect. I just hope that day never comes. Let's just put it that way. So I believe that these Greys are perhaps beings that have lost themselves through the process or act of replication, cloning. And on some levels, we have to take into the spiritual aspect. And most people will say, that's a bit too deep. And why are you making connections there? Well, we don't know what we are as a human. In fact, most of our genesis is a bit of a mystery. And I believe that's the road that I started taking in terms of digging deeper, because I don't think the answer is just through the UFO, now UAP phenomena, or indeed the alien or now non-human entities. But I believe it has a lot to do with what we are and what we represent. And I believe that that will open up a lot of answers for us to those questions that are posed to the inquiring mind. So it is quite deep, and I believe that the Greys are after something that we have that they themselves have not.
Flying saucers, UFOs, now UAPs. It seems that term is always evolving. For what reason, I'm not sure. But you said something interesting about our genesis. There's so much about our past, our hidden history, the secrets to our own potential. But I always think about, the early 1900s when there was just nothing. All of a sudden, the Wright brothers in the United States started flying. They were sued because the people said this is impossible to accomplish. Jules Verne with submarines and rockets, everybody thinking this is impossible, it's just science fiction. Why is it so difficult to understand that maybe, just maybe, time travel, if it exists, it's already happening?
Yes, and that is a very interesting theory and a subject. Of course, we have it here in the United Kingdom, the old Doctor Who series with the TARDIS that could transfer space and time. That always fascinated me as a kid. And this is the really horrible thing, when you get involved in ufology or even cryptozoology or whichever area that floats your boat. You'll find that as a ufologist, if that's what we're labeled as, it will open up these other areas of interest, certainly with cryptozoology and areas of the paranormal, mind, consciousness, life after death, that type of thing. But time travel is interesting. And I think with consciousness, human consciousness, we're beginning to explore within quantum theory that the universe and indeed the mind could be some subject to some type of hologram. And I don't dismiss that. I don't doubt that at all. And memory is important because memory is held within time. So it's possible that to some degree that these beings, these entities are able to skip or slip through certain time periods. And I've been looking a lot, researching for many years now into life after death, parallel lives, what happens to us when we die, the big question. And, certainly with those on the other side, our loved ones connected to perhaps some kind of supreme source that we're all linked to. But certainly it's interesting because the Greys are able to, I believe, use what I would call the psychic internet. And I have addressed this in Terrestrial Trespassers. If we think about it, Mel, we are all, as humans, conscious entities. And I liken a simple example as to the mobile phone. We all have mobile phones. People think, what a lovely phone. This is the phone, but it's not the phone. Actually, the phone is actually the signal. Because the device itself has energy as we have, and a signal, and we have consciousness. The phone records, transmits, and receives information as we do. And when the phone dies, people think, kaput, that's it, information's lost. But it isn't, because energy cannot be destroyed. And everything that's thought, everything that's generated through energy survives. It moves into what was known as the ether, or perhaps in the quantum realm now. And these Greys, I believe, are able to time travel ostensibly. They're able to link into their subject. Be very careful not to say victim, whichever way you're viewing the Greys as good or bad. It's the same with humans. We have the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I believe they're able to interconnect into the human psyche, into us, into what we really represent, which is spirit or soul. I think there are differentiations to be made between those two parallels, but that's another argument. And they can go through our memories because we are time-based. We as human beings live on a world that's operated through motion, and with motion comes time. And it feels to me like these entities are perhaps outside of time. Whether or not they have time within their domain remains to be seen. But they need to get to us to some level. But I also believe what's fascinating, another theory that we can postulate, is that these Greys can move through our time through our memories. They could go to any period within our time, because you find, some people say, oh, I remembered when I was 5, this strange thing happened to me. And I remembered when I was 15, this strange thing happened to me. And such memories sometimes surface a little bit later in your life, whereas before you didn't have them. So it's interesting, I think, with regards to the annals of time travel. I think and feel it's possible. Absolutely. I've never discounted that theory, although, as we said previously before, my brother has differences of opinions there. But you find that, in order for us to understand that, we need a time machine ourselves. And at present, as far as we're aware, we don't have one, unless, of course, the industrial military complex has one within their possession. We don't know. But certainly another area that we can just touch upon here, Mel, is, another area of high strangeness is linked with events that you suddenly find have changed. With regards to the future. One minute we know something and we feel something's happened, and then a few years down the line, someone says to you, oh no, it's not that, it's this. So I think we're beginning to see subtle changes within these timelines, whether or not that these timelines are converging. And that also connects with parallel lives. But there are different areas of time travel that you can take. You can take the conscious part, the physical part that then breaks down into non-physical nature of reality and then reappears somewhere else within time and space, or indeed another dimension. But I believe that the subject matter is absolutely fascinating.
When we last talked, we talked about the deception, how the public has been misled. Since that conversation, do you think the narrative around UFOs, now UAPs, and extraterrestrial contact has changed in the public sphere? Are we seeing a shift, or is it more of the same?
No, I believe there has been a change. And that's really a good point there, Mel. And you must be psychic. And I'll tell you why. I've been asking a few people, because as researchers, we don't have all the answers. All we have are theoretical content, which is just as important. A theory can't be proven until, of course, it's scientifically fact. But I wonder sometimes what the big issue is, because, a lot of people now on our planet can deal with a lot of things. I mean, if you think about mainstream media, take it with a pinch of salt, most people are not fazed by it anymore. The horrors that we see on TV, the constant warring with our species.
There's nothing mainstream about the mainstream media, by the way, as you know.
That's right. Yes, absolutely. So in question to the UFO situation, there must be something else behind this. It's not just a case of, we remembered Orson Welles' broadcast of H.G. Wells' version of War of the Worlds, and everyone went into a blind panic. We have got past that point now. I think that as a public, they know all about UFOs. They've heard of them. Whether they believe them or not is one thing or another. So I don't feel that it's got anything to do with the fact that the public will go AWOL if the system suddenly comes forward and says, oh, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, UFOs, UAPs are real. No, and if you remembered back, I'm black and white with everything. We had some cases on the national news here about certain objects being brought down. They called them on the news channels UFOs. Okay, they called them UFOs. They were brought down, and I can't remember what that was all about, the foreign objects, but they called them UFOs. And I thought, well, that's the first time that we've heard that on national news channels. And most ufologists here in England were puzzled, concerned why the news channels were actually broadcasting UFOs. Was this some kind of psychological test to see how people would react? And to be honest with you, it came and then it went. It fizzled out. It was about these objects. One of them crashed into the waters, and the military were going to go in to check them out. And we didn't hear any more about it. They considered them balloons to begin with, I think, or they shot down a balloon or a UFO. But they were using the acronym UFO, and they've never done that before. So the public didn't react to it. I mean, we didn't see anyone running out in the streets and going crazy. Oh, the UFOs crashed, and they're going to go in and have a look and see what it is. No, I believe that there is a much darker reason, I think. And most people will reject that hypothesis. And I'm not saying that all the ETs are negative, but what I'm saying here is that there has to be another reason as to why the UFO phenomena appears to be one of the most close guarded secrets and why of all time, and why it is the system that we serve, not just here in the United Kingdom with our Parliament, because we had written to Parliament, to Theresa May, I had, to see if we could bring a team together to discuss this around the table. Needless to say, we got silence back. And the same again with the Pentagon, with the future events that have happened just recently with Grush, and of course the claims of this intelligence officer, high-ranking intelligence officer, and of course those in higher positions of power coming from these private corporate companies to state, well, they've been working on some kind of back-engineered technology. They're aware of UFO technology, hardware, and also that they have bodies, I suppose, would be on cryogenic freeze. But I think there's something much more deeper than this. I don't think it's something that the system will fear will change the public's reaction. We can see what's going on now in the world with certain events. There are wars happening. There are, riots going on, all this type of thing. That is unrest. But with the UFO phenomena, no, it seems to be strangely silent. And I've often wondered why that is. And I have a few ideas about that. In terms of the secrecy and why it is that a lot of researchers are steered in the wrong direction or perhaps given false information. And it's just, I think people are ready now. I mean, I don't think they would be bothered. I think researchers like yourself, myself, and many other good researchers, thousands, hundreds of thousands around the world would welcome it. Even if it's negative or positive, it doesn't matter. The question is, we want to know. But continuously, we have this silence. Now, just to interject here very quickly, it's very interesting, Mel, because when we're dealing with life after death, for instance, mediums, for instance, that type of thing, the system's quite happy to, say, well, yeah, it could be, or it could be, because there's no way of measuring it, because most of that is done simply through the mind. Faith is great because there's no way of measuring that through evidence. But when you have evidence, when it's there, sitting on your doorstep, that's a very different story. So I believe that the powers that be, those in charge, those nameless, faceless bureaucrats who, perhaps decompartmentalized within its structured system, but they are still holding back in this knowledge, this awareness that UFOs are real, but still going forward in our age, can you believe, oh, well, we're going to keep silent. We're just going to keep quiet. So that is the big question, isn't it, Mel?
Well, for me, and again, this is just my own personal opinion and humble speculation, when people talk about why do you think the government doesn't want to disclose? And to me, Occam's razor says a few things. Number one, if these beings come from another planet, another realm, another dimension, another time, that means that they have technology far superior than what we have here. So number one, free energy. And number two, the military prowess that they must have by the mere fact that they're here could render us useless. So why would we even pay attention and devote our attention to these so-called leaders of ours?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And there you have it, you see. Now, what's interesting is this, and I think. I will tell you something now, just before we go back to that question, if that's okay, Mel. Sure. And about the UFO situation, and most people will poo-poo it and whatnot, but human consciousness is very fascinating, and it operates in varied levels, as we know. And I remembered, I think that when you start asking yourself honestly, truthfully, and groundedly, what the hell are these things? What are they? Where are they coming from? That's what we want to know. And I'm absolutely sure that there is a spectrum of interdimensional, hyperdimensional, whatever. But I had these two dreams, one night after another. I did include this. I'm not sure if I included it in Terrestrial Trespassers or You, the Public Deceived. I had these two dreams. And these two dreams, and I believe that the human psyche has a way of trying to send you an answer through symbology, or through some kind of a translation that is not verbal. And I've been looking into human consciousness, about the left side, the right side of the hemispheres, and how there's communication, because I want to find out, life after death and how they communicate, where they are. I mean, a whole lot, It's no wonder that I won't end up in a psychiatric ward. And I do have a sense of humor. You need one in this subject matter. But anyway, I had these two dreams. And the first dream, I can't remember which order they were, but I remembered them very clearly. The first dream was of me standing by an open window. It was dark outside, and all of a sudden, I can see this UFO. And I'm in the dream, I'm absolutely shocked. Like, wow, there it is. Good Lord. And there's this need, this wanting to reach out to it, to connect with it. Like, wow. And of course, I had an experience that was quite the reverse. It was a negative experience. But at the same token in this dream, I'm like, wow, there it is. They're real. But then the UFO started to come towards me, and I thought I could hold it. I could actually see what it is. I could feel what this thing is, where it comes from. It was coming closer. And as it came closer, it started to get smaller and smaller. And in the first dream, it was an old dirty bottle. I was holding an old dirty bottle. Okay. So I'm like, well, that's burst my bubble. So then the following night, I kid you not, there was another dream, exactly the same scenario. I'm standing by the window, exactly same window, all the rest of it, and there's the UFO. And I go through the whole actions again, like, wow, there it is. It's like, I want it. I want to know what this is. And as it came closer and closer and closer and got smaller, I then was holding a piece of lead piping, old rusty lead piping. And I said to my brother today, would you believe it? I brought this up today to him, and I said, because I said I was coming on your show, and I said, what is this? What does this mean? And we've been like, well, obviously the human psyche is trying to translate this into a language that we can understand, but I'm still puzzled. Does it mean that the phenomena itself is old, or that the phenomena is operating on a level that we wouldn't even notice? We would just consider it something that is irrelevant. We don't know, or unless, of course, it goes through some kind of transmutation. So I just wanted to interject there, because I believe that, in terms of the UFO subject itself, and going back to what you were saying, I think that our understanding of the subject would be very, very alien. And I believe that when it's discovered with regards to these crafts, where are they coming from? Are they coming through space? If so, that means that the space agencies have been lying to us, because they have cameras up there within satellite technology, seeing what's coming in and what's going out. And I do know there's some controversy with some cameras being turned off and switched back on again, as though the system knows roughly when they're coming in or when they're not. But I believe that these objects, whatever they are, if they are interdimensional, and I've written about this in TT, Terrestrial Trespassers, if they are interdimensional, then I had this idea that they have to build themselves or construct themselves within our reality. And we hear also within crash retrieval operations, where a lot of this material is kept in your great country, in the United States of America. There's a go-between, I think, we understand where the technology is sent to the States. And other parts of the world, but certainly within Britain and the States and so on and so forth. But you hear about these whistleblowers who've come forward and said, well, there's a lot of the material through crash sites is very ordinary, what they find. It's got earth materials in it, but there's a little something that's different. And I wondered, about this force able to manifest itself or build itself, construct itself within our reality. And I think perhaps it's the same when we look at changing the subject very slightly and quickly here into areas of cryptozoology, especially with the dogmen and how they're putrefying bad smells, and they look dead and all the rest of it, as though they come from the ground or something. And so I wonder about this phenomenon about UFO technology and how it's able to integrate into our reality. But I also believe that there must be some kind of agenda. And I've always thought about that with regards to certain extraterrestrial intelligences that are, perhaps possibly downing their crafts in certain remote locations, knowing that they will be found, but also knowing that the material itself will be salvaged and cannibalized by humans to find out how they work, what they're about, where they come from. And I always go back, I'm haunted by Roswell. One of the most famous UFO cases of all time, and now buried in so much controversy, we don't know what is real and what is not. But going back to the primary investigations is where you need to look. And I know there's so many experts out there who have all the answers, but I wondered, because my brother did bring a good point up here, Mel, back in the day, 1947, and I will interject here that I thought about this first of all, that the Roswell crash was so secretive. It was a Mogul weather balloon, so secret, in fact, that the army didn't even know its whereabouts. It took a sheriff to go to it took a rancher to go to the sheriff's office to bring this to the army's attention. So it was that secret. They didn't know it was gone, or it had crashed, rather. But my brother did make a good point here. He said that the UFO that crashed at Roswell, and if it's to be believed with, gentlemen like the late Colonel Philip Corso, if it's believed with regards to the back-engineered technology from this craft, or perhaps certain crafts, the technology was just enough for the human species at that time to work out how things worked. And of course, there is controversy and arguments about, well, our species has now accelerated to the point where we now have, advanced technology, and whether or not this was attributed to some form of extraterrestrial intervention. And it's interesting, I think, was this planned by some other intelligence to push our species forwards? And this is the big question. There was just enough there for the military and the scientific core of the unit to work on, to try and work out. Because if we really think about it, extraterrestrial, ultra-terrestrial, their technology would be light years ahead of us. But we heard about circuit boards, components, laser technology, this type of thing. So I think it's very interesting and highly suspicious when you look into these areas of, alleged UFO crashes, which I do believe have happened and then are covered up quickly. And then rather like Chris Carter's The X-Files, all the evidence disappears. So I believe that the public, if they want this disclosure, which they do, I'm not saying all of them do, but researchers most definitely, because they want the truth. I think the truth is going to be far harder for the system to explain to an already programmed public that has been led to believe that UFOs are spacemen coming from another planet, and that's your lot. But I think that we have to bring into the fray the abduction hypothesis, which is highly complex, and other areas of high strangeness. So, it's a subject matter that really is very interesting, and but I'm very interested, like you, in trying to look at decompartmentalized areas and trying to put the pieces together. So I believe that what we're dealing with, the force, the energy, the intelligence behind it, is very smart, and it seems to know us better than we know ourselves. Let's just put it that way.
If we had that technology right now, you and I decided, hey, I'm going to go pick you up Philip, let's go time travel. We would go back to so many times in history. We would be time traveler, time tourists. And we would probably be told by the agency or the time travel agency, you are not allowed to interact with the population. You are allowed to just watch. Why is it so difficult to conceive that and I know some people think Foo Fighters were UFOs and other people say that they were not. But what if those were tourists experiencing one of the darkest moments of our history?
Yes, and this question has come up before because the extraterrestrials will not intervene. And is that through a code of conduct that they have agreed upon? Well, they've broken that code of conduct because of the abduction program, as we understand it. It is highly possible. I mean, you talk of the Foo Fighters. I remembered when my brother and I were 13 years of age, and this has been documented anyway, and we were with our maternal grandmother. And when these levels of high strangeness touch you, when the singularity connects with you, let me tell you, it's incredible to behold. And in broad daylight, this football-sized silver orb came over to our garden, a clear summer's afternoon, evening, we can't remember. Someone said to me once, they said, did you take down the time? I was a 13-year-old kid, for goodness sake. It's not like I'm going to go in and research her. But this silver orb came over and hung over our grandmother's head. Well, they had a 3-story high house, and it hung roughly where the second floor bedroom windows were. And I remembered looking at it, and it was like, wow, that is incredible. There were no markings on it. There were no lights on it. It was silver. It was not a balloon. It moved with intent. And our grandmother had jokingly said, oh, look, when we asked her what it was, and she said, the fairies have come to take a closer look at us. She didn't seem fazed by it. But I've always considered now that I'm much older and hopefully a little bit more wiser and mature, that could possibly mean what we call the Foo Fighters. And my brother actually stated, he said that was an eye. It was looking at us. It seemed curious about us because we saw it in the sky. And then it moved very quickly and very fast towards our position. And of course, that was back in the 80s. And of course, we don't have any technology like that. In fact, I haven't seen any silver orbs flying around that the military have created. But I wondered, because I believe that the Foo Fighters themselves were there to observe. Absolutely, because they didn't intervene. And of course, the Allies were wondering, if it belonged to the baddies, or the baddies with the goodies, or whichever way you want to see the good and the bad, or the ugly, as it were. So it's possible. I think, to be honest with you, when we take the consideration of time travel, it would be interesting because many films have been done about that, if you influence something within that time that you visited and how that would have a knock-on effect to the future. I really believe that. I really do. But I still go back to the theory of, like, I remembered, are we going through a process of time travel without us really knowing it? Are we converging within parallel lives, parallel universes? And this also takes into consideration time, which is interesting. So I believe that it's possible that, certain extraterrestrials are able to manipulate themselves from one time zone to another, or certainly cross over into very timelines if they're connected with one another. I know it gets a little bit confusing, and reading this off in a few minutes. But if you start looking into quantum theory, if you start looking into the idea of time travel, as it were, it is very conceivable to assume. Because deja vu, for instance, let's just take an example here. A researcher, I'm reading one of his books at the moment, and he is of the opinion that when we die, that we come back and we relive our lives again. So ostensibly, when we experience deja vu, it's because we've got to a point that we know already there's something that's a marker and we try and change it. And I can tell you, if that's the case, I ain't coming back. I'm staying over there on the other side, and I'm going to get a refund because I'm not going to go through this life over and over again. And I think about the other lives that are lived back in the past. Are they still going around in their circles? I kind of I like the idea, but I don't subscribe. I think perhaps the incarnation process, the reincarnation, is definitely a possibility. But the deja vu aspects are interesting because that also is linked with time. You hear of people that suddenly, they could be out in a field and suddenly everything changes around them. The time period changes around them as though they've stepped into another time period, and that's without a machine. So I believe that consciousness itself is a link also into the connection with time travel. I think it's all very well having a craft or a wonderful ship, but I believe that it will have to have something to do with the pilots or the individuals on a conscious level. So I believe that there must be an amalgamation between the technology and, of course, the mind, because, you can't just put on the dial, I'm going to go to 2090 and then go forward because, we don't know if there's anything going to be there. We can go back into the past because we know that's imprinted and done. But there has to be a future. I believe that. And this is where it gets really cranky, but also quite incredible. People have their own theories about it. But I believe that we time travel anyway through consciousness. Remote viewers, for instance, with consciousness can, go in their mind, go back, or they can go forward, or they can, transverse wherever they want. And that is a form of time travel, as it were. So I know that people have the fancy notion of a machine or a ship, and that's wonderful. But I believe that consciousness has a lot to do with it. And I believe that there's an interconnection between consciousness and time. And also, if you can create a machine that can go forward and backwards, tell me where it is, Mel, because I want to tell you something. I want to see the T-Rex. I want to see what that really looked like. I want to see what that beast looked like.
Sometimes I daydream, where would I go? Actually, let me rephrase that. When would I go? It's like, sometimes people, if they say, I made an alien, where are you from? I would ask, when are you from? But I don't know why I'm thinking of two things. The TV series Taken by Steven Spielberg, 2002. I remember watching that when it came out, and I remember that first scene where there's a B-17 Fortress, and it's saved and it's put down. And then years later, when I started doing this show, and then I meet Sergeant Clifford Stone, rest in peace, and he was telling me all the stories, and the first time when he joined the military, he was taken blindfolded, I believe, on a plane, and he suspected he was somewhere in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War. And he went to this opening in a field around a forest, and there was this opening with a similar plane to the B-17, a large cargo plane, on the ground, which was not crashed. It was almost as if a giant hand put it down there.
Yes.
When you see those things and you see why did that happen, apparently the occupants were shot, were dead, but whoever put that down had some kind of technology that's beyond our comprehension. What do you think happened there?
Well, I think I know the case, and when you hear about these individuals that come forward, and I am, one of them, because, I have had very close connections with UFOs on a number of occasions, and I mean close. The last was the 9th of April, 2016, precisely 11:15 p.m. at night. The images that were the whole drama that unfolded has been analyzed and unknown. But when it happens to you, before we go to Sergeant Clifford Stone, bless his soul, when you go through this experience, when you have it, people look at you as though, you're lying or you must be mad. But when you've had the experience, it is such a shock that your sense of reality is completely diminished. And you go back over and over and over again, and yet the levels of high strangeness, this force, whatever is behind this force, is able to manage both time and space. Because when my brother and I come back from Copal to see some police friends, after an early birthday, Mel and I drove back. It was a cold night, clear night, stars were out, and these three massive, huge, circular white objects were just hovering low. They descended. There was no one walking up and down our road. I mean, we live in a relatively quiet area, but there is always someone come. It was a Saturday night. There's always someone coming from the pub or walking their dog. I can guarantee you go somewhere, there's always someone there. There was no one but me and my brother, and it felt like it just snowed. That that sound. Well, there is really. The sound is muffled.
It's almost silence when it snows. Yeah,
as though the objects had somehow. They didn't alter time because we'd lost no time, but altered the environment. Now, when I tried to connect with Clifford Stone some years ago now. I wanted him on our radio show that we don't do anymore, but and I couldn't get through to him. I couldn't link through to him. And of course, when you hear his stories and his experiences, it's quite fascinating. And people will say, "Oh, Clifford is this, Clifford." No, because I understand, I can relate with Clifford, how he felt, like many other people who've had these things happen to them. And I know that Clifford was involved in a secret operation, crash retrieval operation, and I know that he had some connection with an EBE or extraterrestrials.
Right.
And with regards to the aircraft itself, I do remember the case. I'm not, and I am very honest. I don't remember all the details, but there was one, I believe, where all the passengers were all still strapped in their chairs, and it was quite a grisly find where the thoraxes had been cut, and their chains were around their necks, and it was a bit of a mess. And so with regards to that type of technology, that is quite superb and incredible, not unfortunately for the passengers or the pilots of the aircraft. And I wonder sometimes why these forces do this. We go into the uncomfortable territory, which I have, and most ufologists don't want to acknowledge it or don't want to speak about it. And it is to do with the human situation as well as the animal situation, mutilations. And I've often wondered, what on earth is this all about? Where is this coming from? Why is this happening? And I believe that it's possible that we have been infiltrated, not just by one extraterrestrial force, but by varied extraterrestrial forces. The question is, well, where are they? Where are they hanging out? Why aren't they here to help us? And I don't kind of get it, but I believe that the system that we serve, or well, rather not the system, those governing bodies above the system, which is controlling us and controlling human thought and the way things are directed, which is absolutely pit, with the way that they program the public and the same old spiel coming out day in, day out. The incredible realization that we are being visited by extraterrestrial, ultra-terrestrial, interdimensional beings is non-negotiable because we know it's happening. But I believe that, whatever's going on, that's kind of cruel. Because we hear of cases, especially within the famous Bermuda Triangle, the Dragon's Triangle as well, other areas of around the ocean, where people have actually time traveled in some of those aircrafts where they've gone forward in time, or their clocks and compasses have gone. They've actually moved forward in time or backwards in time. Why these intelligences would do that to the crew and then place the aircraft deliberately down in an area that most researchers and investigators would think, hang on, this plane didn't crash, it's just been placed there. That is chilling indeed, isn't it? That is absolutely chilling.
Well, I'm looking at what you just said. I didn't think we were going to be talking about time travel on the Bermuda Triangle, but you probably have heard of the many flights. The media doesn't talk about this that much. The Bermuda Triangle and the missing aircraft, the planes that supposedly land years after they departed. Why is this not more out there in the mainstream affairs?
Yes, well, I mean, that would be admittance by the powers that be. You see, the structured system that we serve, this is the really annoying thing about it. You, me, and many others have woken up, or at least we're waking up to the fact that we've been conned huge, big time. Not just within the annals of UFO research or cryptozoology or with the paranormal, but also with our past and Genesis. And this centralized programming has narrowed the field of human consciousness, human awareness. So many beloved souls out there, God love them, will reject openly the hypothesis of aliens or extraterrestrials, time travel, you name it, because the system has programmed them into a limited level of understanding. And going back again, we go through a period of transmutation when you've, not necessarily because you've had an experience, but those that are interested in the field of research to begin with. But I believe that the system that we serve is working towards an agenda. Now, the question is, and I've argued this with my brother, my twin brother, and not argued in like, having a go at each other, but constructive arguments. We debate this, and I normally have a group of other people that we talk about these matters and throw things backwards and forwards because, we have to be open to all forms of speculation. But whatever's going on in this world, and there's a much larger picture here, not just based primarily within UFO research or extraterrestrials, but this is going to open a can of worms because whatever's going on in this world, whoever's behind the masquerade of this control cannot be human. Now, there are certain events which have happened on this planet that we are not really allowed to talk about. We didn't mention, and that's the other thing, censorship. And you ask yourself, well, where is this healthy form of debate, of intellectual talk, instead of, coming to a roadblock or being silenced? Well, if someone's trying to silence you or they're trying to silence something, it's telling you something, isn't it? It's telling you that, you're not allowed to go there. And if you're not allowed to go there, that tells you, well, it's a secret. And if something's a secret, it's either fantastic that they don't want the public to know, want to keep it for themselves, or it's bad news. So I believe with regards to the structured system, going back into our past, if you think about it with human consciousness and then going into human conscious dissidence, the onslaught of these objects have been seen for millennia. But what's interesting is that with regards to the phenomena itself, when the churches began to rise, back in the day, and going right back in the day, I'm not talking about now, although they're still in force today to a degree, but back in the day, the churches were there to contain and control human consciousness. Elements of the paranormal, i.e. witches, for instance, who used their mind in different ways, were burnt or drowned. And people within the churches that went to the churches were, if they stepped out of line, they were punished. So this indoctrination of belief in structured human consciousness was being directed in a certain way. Anything that the establishment saw as a direct violation towards people opening their minds to any form of subjects that wasn't considered norm were dealt with. Now, I believe also that those in charge, those governing bodies in charge, whoever they are, that were preaching, oh, no, you can't use your mind for witchcraft, you can't summon this, you can't summon that. I believe that they are aware of the power of the human mind, and not just the power of the human mind, but what the mind is, because the mind is the source of all that is. It is literally consciousness. And I believe that our species, many of us, when we get to a point of enlightenment, you can bet your bottom dollar this system will come down with another war or anything to do with fear-based. So what we're seeing here actually is fear being promoted by the system. And I believe that this is its way of controlling the masses, of steering them in a different direction. Now, the UFO subject, the UFO topic, is one of the most, as I said before, as we all know, the close guarded secrets of all time and, dare I say it, space. It is so closely guarded. And this is why we go back to that question, what is it about this subject matter that the system is not relenting, is not allowing us to know about. And, I believe that most of the public, if they were told on national news going round in a circle again, we have them, they're here, we have them, people would be like, wow, and also not forgetting the religious establishments, especially the Catholics, and one of the popes said that they would baptize an alien, if they revealed themselves. So most of the people within the religious fraternity would embrace that and accept that because their churches have told them it's fine, it's okay. No, I believe that there is, to some degree, a more nefarious reason behind this. And I like the way that you, Mel, interjected with the fact that, that these people in charge, whoever they are or have access to that magic. And it could possibly, conceivably be, if we assume this, that those in possession of this technology are safeguarding it against other countries, that they don't want this technology to fall into their hands. But at the same token, I don't know where the end result of this is coming. I don't know whether or not we're going to get that disclosure. And if it does come, it doesn't look like it's coming anytime soon. I mean, the question is absolutely fascinating. And I will just finish off with this small part here and state that, I can't claim anything, but I did have an impression when Grush and, of course, Ross Coulthart, and I had some emails from him. I was very honored to have had some emails from him because I'm very interested in the case that was going on with regards to Grush and, of course, those in the Pentagon. I had this vision of like, wow, what if these beings were like huge reptilians? And I mean huge, it's like on ice in armor. But they made some interesting conjectures here, because I believe they said there was some kind of like biological but kind of like machine-like thing, or I wonder whether or not Ross Coulthart will actually write a new book and spill the beans and let the public know, through these whistleblowers what these things look like, because you could bet your bottom dollar we'll all be going out to buy the book, Mel. It's interesting, it's fascinating, yeah.
Well, that's interesting because you mentioned reptilians. If we had the capability of having these craft traverse the universe or dimensions or time, you would think that maybe we would have biological entities, clones that could withstand all that. I mean, some people say there are no bathrooms in UFOs, and you don't see any sexual organs, and you don't see a mouth, and maybe they just, like plants, they have light as their energy source. Who knows? But the question is the relationship between the Greys and reptilians. Have you uncovered anything new about how they interact? Do you think one is subordinate to the other, or are they working together for a common purpose?
That is a very good question, and I must go back a little bit here. When I had my abduction back in 1989, and there were 3 reptilians, huge, and it's something I will never forget. And there were Greys on board as well. And of course, I remembered after, experiencing that, being very ashamed. And because a lot of the fame was centered around the Greys, the reptilians didn't seem to have a key part within that. And I remembered, and sorry to state this, but it is important. You were talking about this. It's a very interesting question, Mel. When I had my first UFO book published called Believe, Bridging the Gap Between the Psychic and UFO Phenomena by Kappa-Bound Publishing, I believe that was published in 2009 because the Reaching for the Divine Psychic book came out in 2007. And my publisher had the whole transcript of what happened, and it had been published before in a magazine that was published by Matthew Williams magazine. Many years before. And in the book, the publisher said, well, Philip, I'll publish the book, but we have to retract the part about your intrusive investigation on board where you were. And I said, well, John, his name was John Day. He's passed over now, bless him. He was a good man. I said, why would I need to retract that part of the chapter? And he said, well, because most of the public won't understand about the reptilians. And it was yay or nay. I mean, if I didn't want to change it, the book wouldn't be published. So I had to retract that part. And thank God that the whole thing had been published beforehand, because someone would come forward and say, hang on a minute, you've added this in. So that was kind of strange. And then, of course, you hear all this stigmatism about reptilians. And now what's strange, going through that process of transmutation of thought, back in the day, a lot of people are now talking about them. I even had one person telling me their names and their high commands. I lost the plot with that. But anyway, these reptilians that I saw, I will tell you for the record, which I've said before, were the most horrific. I mean, people just talk about them as though it's like a walk in the park. And when you meet someone, I suppose when you hear someone like the wonderful and lovely Sergeant Clifford Stone, and most people would be eyes open and unbelieving of his testimony. But it's true. These beings were powerful. You wouldn't mess with them. They had no form of empathy. There was no empathy at all. All I was a piece of meat to them. I had no idea what they wanted, what they were after, but I can tell you they were soulless. They were just awful. There's no words to describe it. Horror. And people laugh and they joke and they say, oh no, what a bit of a fun there, a bit of a moment there. When you were in that situation, let me tell you, that changes everything. So, I'm not saying there aren't love and light beings out there. I understand that, and I embrace that. It's just unfortunate that I did not go through an experience that was that most people are trying to make fit for me to accept their version of what they believe it was all about. All I can tell you is what happened, and all I can tell you is how I felt, and all I can tell you is the situation I was in. So with regards to the reptilians and the greys, it seems feasible to assume that because on board that craft, if it was a craft, and it was to me, but heck, they could have taken me into their time zone or time frame, or maybe feel like it was a craft. Who knows? To me, it was a craft. But there was a grey on board. It was cream-coloured more than grey, and it was, I wouldn't say mechanical, but it seemed subservient. But these reptilians had gone when they'd finished their procedure with me. So that is very interesting. I mean, we hear about the mantis, we hear about the reptilians, we hear about the greys, the tall greys, the whites. I mean, where the hell are they all? So this is where my descent into the abyss, as it were, or down the rabbit hole started. And when the publisher had retracted that part, and I thought, well, I'll just go along with it because he liked the theories in the book. He wanted the theories in there more than the abduction. And then we find out that the reptilians have been mentioned. And of course, I know Christopher Turner, who's a producer of a documentary called Don't Mention the Reptilians. And he is linked with our very good friend, mine and my brother's very good friend, dear friend, Paul Sinclair, a researcher and author, ufologist and cryptozoologist up in Bentham. He's written a number of books, the Truth Proof books, that are brilliant, by the way. He's another British researcher. But this documentary was done called Don't Mention the Reptilians. And I know that David Icke was interviewed on there, and I have seen David Icke talk live last year. Brilliant man, absolutely incredible man.
By the way, I don't mean to interject, and I don't mean to sound as if I'm trying to prevent you from talking about the reptilians. We just have to take a one and only break. And when we come back, I want you to continue. Take your gloves off, because, a lot of people, the kumbaya, all the aliens are positive, and others who say they're all negative. I'm in the middle. I think the universe is there's polarity everywhere. There's duality, there's good and there's bad. If we go out to another planet because we need to take their resources, well, we're the saviors for our own humankind, but to the people who live there or whatever type of entities live there, we are the enemy. So it's all subjective. But how can people buy the new book and all your other books, Philip?
Well, one of the most famous platforms in the world is Amazon. That's where you can easily get them. My other books are out of print that you could have got in the shops from other publishers, but the new ones are from Amazon.
Wonderful. One more hour to come, and I'll let you continue talking about reptilians, because a lot of people don't delve into that, and I wonder why your publisher decided not to. It makes you wonder, when we think of who's on top of the pyramid, that all-seeing eye, the puppeteer, if in fact it may be reptilians. But one more hour of Philip Kinsella. This is Mel Husselrick, and you are listening to VERITAS. Don't go anywhere. Thank you for listening to the first part of this important VERITAS episode. To listen to the rest and access all of our exclusive material, head over to the Veritas Plus member section or click the subscribe button at veritasproject.com. Don't forget to visit the Veritas store for a range of great products, including focused life force energy. Experience the benefits with a 15-day free trial of FLFE today. No credit card required. If you'd like to get in touch with me, be a guest on the program, have a guest suggestion, or want to provide feedback, just click the contact button on our website at veritasproject.com. Thank you for listening to The Veritas Project, because you don't want to believe, you want to know.
The stillness of a sleepless night, figures move just beyond our sight. The greys appear with eyes like stone. Are they from realms we've never known? Are they travelers from distant stars, or shadows that have come so far? Through the void, they find their way. Encounters of the great kind, here to stay. They slip through time, they bend the light. Silent whispers in the dead of night. Do they walk through dreams we've never had, or live in worlds where time's gone mad? Are they watchers from another day, or fragments of a lost array? Through dimensions they make their play. Encounters of the great kind, who are they? Beyond our senses, beyond our fear, the greys draw closer. Are they near? From distant realms or futures past, they come.